All right, well, if you've been with us on Wednesday night, we are studying through the book of Esther. We just barely got into chapter 2 last time, so we're going to start tonight with verse 5 of chapter 2. We're just going to do a little quick recap, whatever. We're going to talk about what we talked about for just a minute. Review, yeah. So, King Ahasuerus, better known as Xerxes of the Persian Empire, has thrown this 6-month World's Fair, if you will, where he's brought all his leaders in, presumably to promote this war he's about to go into with Greece. It culminates in this week-long drunken party, for lack of a better word. During this time, he calls for his wife, the Queen Vashti, to come and present herself to his guest, presumably for the purpose of showing her off and bragging. Here's my trophy wife. Stand in awe of my greatness, kind of thing. So she turns him down, which I think we kind of polled the women in the audience, and they said they probably would have done the same thing under the circumstances. So in response to that, she is deposed as queen, never allowed to see the king again, and a search is now on for a new queen. And basically, it's the ancient Persian version of The Bachelor, if you will. I mean, that's kind of what we got going on here. They've rounded up all the young virgins in the empire. They're having this huge beauty contest. Basically, you're first of all, you don't have a choice in this. You're rounded up. You're made part of the king's harem, whether you want to be or not. You basically spend a year getting ready for your chance with the king. You get one shot, and if he chooses you, he chooses you, and if he doesn't choose you, then you go back and live out the rest of your life as the king's concubine in his harem, probably never to see the king again unless he just happens to ask for you. But certainly, you would have no rights or recourse. You're basically a slave at that point, from that point on. So that's kind of where we left off. Let's pick up, I'm in chapter 2, verse 5. In Shushan, or Susa, the citadel, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shemaiah, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful when her father and mother had died, and Mordecai took her as his own daughter. Okay, so who's Mordecai? What's he doing in Persia? Huh? He was exiled. He was part of a deportation which took place in 598 BC. It was a deportation primarily of the well-to-do families. The people that they took were the best and brightest, and the ones they left were the poorest. So if you were really poor and you didn't amount to much, you got to stay in Jerusalem. If you were well-to-do or you had some marketable skill, you get taken away. So one of the few times in life where it pays to be a nothing and a nobody, this might have been it. But he was part of the well-to-do aristocracy that's carried off the 598 BC. Now, I say it would have been his ancestors. So if you look, Kish was the one carried away from Jerusalem. And Kish would have been like his grandfather, because Mordecai well, maybe great-grandfather. Mordecai was the son of Jair, the son of Shemaiah, the son of Kish. So what would that be? Great-grandfather? His father would have been Jair, his grandfather Shemaiah, and his so his great-grandfather is the one carried off into exile. So what does that tell me? That his family has lived in Persia now originally Babylon, now Persia, because they're the ones in power. But his family has lived in exile now this is going on the 4th generation. So they've been established there. Now, Mordecai is caring for this young lady named Esther. Now, what is Esther to Mordecai? What? I didn't hear what you said. Niece. Okay, yeah. So it's here. It's done. Somebody before church said it's a riddle. It's done like a riddle, and it kind of is. But it is his uncle's daughter. So think about it. Think about your uncle, and their daughter would be your what? Cousin. Yeah. So I mean, we would have just said it was his cousin, but his uncle's daughter. I'm curious, some of the newer translations, do they say cousin? Cousin, okay. So your newer translations are probably going to say cousin. I'm working with New King James, so they're going to follow a lot of that wording that the King James would have. So we get uncle's cousin, uncle's daughter. I think like probably NIV, NASB. Okay, NASB follows, which that probably is the literal wording, uncle's daughter. I'm thinking probably NIV would probably say something like cousin. Cousin. NIV is cousin, so they're going to clean that up a little bit for us. So, but anyway, yeah, that's the idea. So now, we're told that her name, we're told it's Hadassah, that is Esther. Now, what's going on here? All right. Hadassah would have been her Hebrew name. But apparently, her name is changed to, a more Persian/Babylonian name, presumably in the exile to deal with. In other words, so she has a Hebrew name, but she also has, probably for convenience sake, one that would be more palatable in the society in which they're living now. So Esther, so first of all, let's do it backwards. Esther, anybody want to know, take a guess what the name Esther means? Star, it means star. What about Hadassah? Myrtle tree, yeah. So now, ladies, tell me, if your name was Myrtle, hopefully nobody's name is Myrtle in here. If your name was Myrtle, wouldn't you want to change it to Star? I mean, really? No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. My grandma's name was Myrtle. So, I mean, to me, when I hear Myrtle, I think of a little old lady, Myrtle. Yeah, we have friends that they name their little girl, and they're preachers. They're not their preachers. He's a preacher. She's a preacher's wife. Anyway, they named their little girl Hadassah, and I'm not thinking. I'm like Hadassah. I'm like, where did you get that? And they're like, well, that was Esther's name, and I'm like, well, yeah. I guess I got like that's not something that I ever really pulled out of Scripture. Like we get one little line. Mordecai brought up Hadassah, that is Esther. And that's pretty much all that's said. So I'm not thinking, when you say, oh, my daughter's name is Hadassah, I'm not thinking, oh, well, that's Esther. I'm just not. But now that I know someone named that, it means something to me. So anyway, Esther changed her name from Myrtle to Star. And no one would fault her for that probably, right? But though Mordecai raises Esther as a daughter, really. She's his cousin, but she's orphaned. And so she's raised by Mordecai pretty much as a daughter. And God is going to use this little orphan girl, this little orphan Jewish girl. He's going to use her to deliver his people. Now, why? Yeah, because God is good, and it was his choice, and God does what he wants to. And here is a pattern that we see throughout Scripture and even today. God uses the downtrodden. So if you think, I don't amount to much, I don't have a lot to offer, you are in a prime spot to be used by God, because those are the people that God uses. God hardly ever uses the high and mighty to accomplish very much in his kingdom. He uses the unlikely, the unsung, the ones that you would least expect. Those are the ones that he uses. And so here we have this little orphan Hebrew girl that God is going to use in a miraculous and mighty way to deliver his people, simply because he chooses to do it, not because of anything. I was doing in one of our churches, the Ghosts of Churches Past, I was doing a Bible study on Jesus choosing the disciples, and I just asked the question, why did God choose these men, these 12 men? Like, why did he choose these 12 men? And one guy raised his hand, he popped off, he said, because they were uniquely qualified to do the job. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are we reading the same scripture? They were fishermen, tax collectors. In fact, the most religious one of the bunch was probably Judas, and we saw how that turned out. So, I mean, he did it because he chooses not the likely candidate, the unlikely candidate. And that's what we see with Esther here. Questions on those verses? All right, let's look on then to verse 8. So it was when the king's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered at Shushan, the citadel, under the custody of Hegai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace into the care of Hegai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor, so he readily gave beauty preparations to her besides her allowance. Seven choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. Esther had not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare, of what was happening to her. Each young woman's turn came to go in to King Ahasuerus after she had completed 12 months' preparation according to the regulations for women, for thus were the days of their preparation appointed: 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. That's a years-long beauty treatment. That's pretty significant. Thus prepared, each young woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. And in the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz, something like that, Shashgaz, and the king's eunuch who kept the concubines. She would not go in to the king again unless the king delighted in her and called her by name. So basically you get a year's worth of beauty treatments and preparations. You get one night with the king. Then you go back and you're forever part of the harem, but you're not really the queen, or you're not the queen, and you don't really have wife status, but you can't go back to your old life either. Your only shot is that the king likes you and chooses you as the new queen. So the rules of the contest, you get a year's preparation. 6 months of that, you were treated with oil of myrrh, and then you get 6 months of perfume. King wanted to make sure you smell good when you come in. And for your one night with the king, you could take anything you wanted with you from the house of women. In other words, you could take whatever you thought would help you win the king's favor. You could take that. That was your thing. But you weren't allowed to go back home after your night with the king. Now, why? Why not? They did. So they became the king's possession at that point. So you got to understand this. Like the king protected his harem because once the king had slept with a woman, then if that woman went and slept with some other man, then he in some way had claim to the kingdom. It doesn't make sense to us because that's not how our society works. That's how it worked there. There's a story where King David, his son Absalom, the wild child Absalom, like when he's trying to take over the kingdom, like he pitches a tent like in broad daylight and sleeps with King David's concubines, his harem. Well, you think, what's that? I mean, he's sleeping with his dad's wives. That's weird. I mean, it's just weird. And it is weird, but he was making a claim. I'm king now because I've been with the royal harem. I mean, that's the idea. So you don't get to go back because once you've been with the king, you're the king's property. And anyone else that would take the king's property, that could be considered a threat on the throne, on the kingship. Does that make sense? We don't think that way, but that's how they thought. You take my harem, then that's a threat to my authority. So you don't get to go back. You don't get a choice as to whether you come be a part of the harem. You're taken. You get one night with the king, and then you go back to becoming part of the harem. You don't get to go home. You don't have a choice in that either. Is it right? Is it good? Is it fair? It's none of those things, but it's how it was. Now, how can you see God already at work in this royal contest? This ugly, mixed up, messed up thing that we can find so many things wrong with, and yet you see God at work already in it? Yeah. He's protecting Esther. He's going to use Esther by allowing her to be in a spot where she can be used. Do what? Yeah. So he the king's servant, the king's eunuch here that takes care of the women, like God lets Esther find favor with him. So she gets special treatment. She gets the best place in the house. She gets the best beauty treatments, even more so than her allotment. Take some more blush, honey. You're going, whatever you need there, that kind of thing. And so, he's God is at work here. Now, I may have this question later on. I kind of do, but let me go ahead and ask it now. Why in the world would God choose to use? Why would God choose to work in such a messed up situation as this? There you go. He often works in messed up situations. Hardly ever do we take God a perfect situation and say, well, God, I've got all the pieces just right. All I need you to do is glue them together. Is that how we usually come to God? Or is it just, God, here's a jumbled up mess that I've made of things. Could, fix it, please. And he does, and God works through imperfect people and imperfect situations to bring about his perfect will. And that's what we see here. Romans 8:28, God causes all things to work together for good to those that love him and are called according to his purpose. Not all things are good, but the promise is that God can take even the bad things and work them for our good and his glory. And that's what I see here. Questions on those verses? Right. Sure. Right. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Israel is in this mess they're in because of their own rebellion, and yet God's still taking care of them. So, good point. Oh, I think so. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Esther is a unique book. It's one of only a couple of books where God isn't explicitly mentioned in the book. There's no explicit mention of God in the book, and yet God is everywhere in Esther. You just have to look. You just have to see it. So, all right. Well, let's look on then to verse 15. Now, when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, that's a weird way of phrasing that, who had taken her as his daughter to go in to the king, she requested nothing but what Haggai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all. He likes feasting. Have you picked up on that? For all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to the generosity of a king. When virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai as when she was brought up by him. Okay, so Esther can choose anything she wants to. This is going to play into whether she's chosen as the next queen or not. How does she display great wisdom in what she chooses? What? No, I thought you said something. Okay. What? Yeah. Right. I mean, he listened. So the guy that's in charge of the harem, like, he likes Esther. Like, he has taken Esther under his wing. He knows better than probably anyone what the king is going to like and respond to more than probably anybody else that Esther's going to come into contact with. So she listens to him. What else do you see here? What does it take to do that? What does it take to go to someone and say, what do you think I ought to do? What does it take to do that? Humility. humility, which humility seems to be one of Esther's greatest and most beautiful qualities, and quite possibly is one of the things that made King Ahasuerus fall in love with her. I don't know. But it certainly seems to be one of her best and most beautiful traits. So what are you going to bring? Well, what you bring will speak of yourself. Like what you carry with you is going to, what are you going to take? Are you going to take adornments? And I want jewels. I want all the jewels that I can put on my hands and fingers, or you want more beauty treatments? What do you want? You want nice clothes? What is it that you want? Because whatever you bring is going to speak to you. I got a feeling that the servant here says, just be yourself. I don't know that. But she humbly says, "What should I take?" And he spells out, "This is what you take." And whatever it was, this is what seemed to make the difference. Now, she doesn't tell that she's Jewish at this point. She doesn't reveal that at this point. Why wouldn't she? Do what? She had promised more. And why didn't Mordecai want her to tell? Yeah, so, the Jews were an oppressed people at this time. They were still in exile. They were allowed to go home, but they were still an oppressed people. If it was revealed that she was a Jew, she probably would not be considered for being the queen. In other words, if her true identity was found out, then that probably would have ended her chances of ever being queen right there. And there's something to be said in all of this for timing. When she reveals it, it will be the most strategic time, and it will be to save her people. So at the perfect time, it will be revealed who Esther is and who her people are, but timing is everything. They didn't know that, no. So, in other words, I'm not saying that she's playing that. I think God kind of held it for just the right time to be. No, he would not. He would not have known that. That's right. But God is working all of that in timing, his timing. Now, how is God at work through Mordecai? He raises Esther. He brings her up. He cares for her. He checks on her every night. He's still caring about her. Yeah, do what? Yeah, so he's advising her. Don't tell who you are. He's taking care of her. He's checking on her. I think it probably broke his heart when his cousin that he's raised as his own daughter is, forcibly taken against her will and made part of the king's harem. But, he goes on to say, who's to say, and this is further into the story, but, perhaps God placed you here for such a time as this. So he can see God at work in all of this. Yes, sir. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's right. If she were operating under pride, then the Jews all hope would have been lost for the Jews, at least through Esther. Maybe God raises up somebody else, but for Esther's, it wouldn't have come through Esther. That's true. Questions on those verses? So who's the hero of the story? Ultimately, it's God, isn't it? There's a sense in which Esther is. the little orphan girl that's going to rise to be queen. Every girl's dream, right? And probably without all of the, the details and baggage as to how she became queen, but she's kind of becomes the hero. She's going to rescue. God is going to work through Esther to rescue his people. What about Mordecai? He's a hero as well, isn't he? But he's kind of a behind-the-scenes one. So what does this say about the way God uses people? Well, some he uses in the forefront, like Esther. Esther's going to be in the forefront. She's going to be, her name is what, the book bears. We don't read the book of Mordecai. We read the book of Esther. She's the queen. She's the one out in front. She's the one that they have holidays and celebrations for. But there's also some that he uses behind the scenes, in the background, like Mordecai. Esther would have never been in the situation to do what she was able to do if Mordecai hadn't have been faithful to God. And so God is using Mordecai to get Esther into that position, and then he's using Esther. So he's using some people in the forefront, some people in the background, but it's God working through it all. And God works the same way today. Some people get in the forefront. I'm kind of a forefront. This is what God called me to do. I mean, here I am. I'm in front of everybody. I'm the kid really that, my knees shook when I had to give an oral book report in English class. But yet, God has a sense of humor, and here I am. I'm in the forefront. You may be more of a background person, but it's God who works through us all to accomplish his purpose, and I think that's important to see. So what can we say about how God works through circumstances? Well, it's not always pretty, is it? It's not always clean and neat. In the book of Esther, God takes an ugly situation and works it for his glory. And I think God takes our life, our world, which is ugly sometimes, and he works it for his glory. God can work and will work good things out of people's messes and failures. Romans 8:28. If you don't have that memorized, memorize it and carry it with you your whole life. Because there'll be times in your life that you'll look around and go, God, what are we doing? What is going on? Why? And if you can hang on to the fact that not all things in life are good. There's never a promise that everything in life is going to be good. The promise is that God can take even the bad stuff and work it for our good and for his glory if we love him and are called according to his purpose. So does the story of Esther, does it remind you of another Bible character? Who? I can't. Moses. To some extent, Moses. The one I was thinking of was Joseph. You remember Joseph is sold into slavery. He's a foreigner. He's unknown, but he's favored by the servant of Pharaoh. He rises to be second to the king, and he's used to preserve his people. So it's kind of, very similar circumstances to the story of Joseph that we see in Esther here. So, questions on chapter 2? Yeah, absolutely. He's kind of like her, he's kind of her mentor, and he's her cheerleader, and he's, encourager and all of that, We need that. I think everybody probably has that. I mean, Lisa is mine. I mean, many's the time that I've, come home on a Sunday night and, Lisa's had to talk me down from, just going and selling shoes Monday morning, because, and this whole ministry thing it's hard. I don't know if y'all know that or not, but this whole ministry thing, it can be hard. And, and there's times where it feels like you don't have a friend, but God gave me a friend that I always have. And so Lisa has many times has talked me down. Yeah. So, and yes, absolutely. All right, so I've been kind of showing you these little snippets of video on Wednesday night. Susa and when the events of this story, they take place in modern-day Iran. The State Department frowns on you taking a tour of Iran at this time in history. But there are some cool places. So I'm giving you just a little bit of if, we're going there virtually. We're touring it virtually. So tonight we're going to look at the tomb of Esther and Mordecai in modern-day Iran. Now, is this the real tomb? I don't know, but it's kind of cool. It's kind of a cool place to look at. So there's two little videos. Each one is about 2 minutes long. The first one is this really scholarly sounding gentleman with an accent. I don't know if it's British or Australian or something. And he's going to tell you all about the tomb of Esther and Mordecai. And then the second video is some nut with a handy cam that has gone over to Iran and gone in this thing and filmed it around. So to me, I like that one because it looks like this is something I would have done. Let's sneak over to Iran and film the tomb of Esther and Mordecai. So anyway, check this out. Let's go to Iran tonight and see what we can find.
Looking around, we see writings in Hebrew, including the Ten Commandments. This tomb tower was constructed in the 14th century, and behind this heavy stone door is believed to be the graves of Esther and her cousin and guardian Mordecai. Esther's story is contained in the Old Testament book by the same name. Esther married a Persian king, often considered to be Xerxes. As queen, she was able to save the Jews living in exile in Persia from massacre by an evil army commander. And so Esther became someone venerated in Jewish history. And this tomb became a place of pilgrimage for Jews down the centuries. Looking around, we see writings in Hebrew, including the Ten Commandments. The interior is fairly congested, with most of the space being taken up by the wooden bases and the two coffins they contain. And so our visit is over fairly quickly. There is no way of telling if tradition is correct. Were these really the bodies of Esther and Mordecai? It'd be nice to think that they were.
Mandi üretmez.
We appreciate it. I've enjoyed being with you. I hope that you've enjoyed being here as well. And we'll continue on next week as we pick up with the story of Esther. We're going to close in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time to study your word.